Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. We appreciate your time. I'm Katie Earle. I'm the coordinator of our University Express program, and we're joined here with folks from Shakespeare and Delaware Park. Welcome, everybody. I will let them introduce themselves, and I know Grace is really going to be the moderator for today. So quickly, I'll go through our regular intro. We are recording the session, and I'll try to post it on the website in the near future. We'll be using our chat feature today. So if you have any questions or comments for anybody, type that right into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the time we have. And if you're new to us, chat's located at the lower right-hand side of your computer screen. Expand that. And if you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen, you'll see your control panel and you'll be able to find your chat from there. So we hope you have fun. And quickly, we'll just thank our sponsors. It's my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all their support. And Senior Services is at 858-8526 if you need us. All right, I'll turn it over to Grace. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Katie, as always, and thank you, University Express, for once again having Shakespeare and Delaware Park join you for these exciting virtual workshops. I know we're usually in person, but it's been so great this last year to be finding a way to still connect. As Katie mentioned, my name is Grace. I'm the Education and Community Outreach Coordinator here with Shakespeare and Delaware Park. This is, I believe, our third or fourth virtual session this year. So we're really excited to be back today with something we call Behind the Curtain. And I'm joined by Gabriella and Kiana, two of our actors. And I'm going to be talking with them today about their process behind the curtain, learning Shakespeare, performing Shakespeare, and breaking down his texts. So I'm just going to pass it off really quick to Gabriella and Kiana before we start our little panel discussion here. And ladies, if you could just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, both as performers and with Shakespeare in Delaware Park, and if you're involved in anything right now for our summer season. Gabriella, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Gabriella McKinley, and I'm originally from Staten Island, New York, but I actually came out to Buffalo to go to Buffalo State College. That's where I recently graduated from, and I studied theater there as well. So now I'm staying in Buffalo, buying a house out here, and decided to stay in Buffalo, right, and enjoy my time here. Um, I've been in a number of shows at Buffalo State and a couple around in the community. I've worked at the Cabinoki Theater. I was in their production of Hairspray. I've worked at Torn Space Theater. I was in their production of The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Um, and I had some other gigs lined up for 2020, but who didn't lose those opportunities, right? So I've gotten to meet a lot of professionals around here, which has been awesome. Um, Buffalo State, I was in their production of The Color Purple, where I played Suge Avery, one of my favorite roles ever. And I was in The Drowsy Chaperone, where I played Trix, and I was in um, so many shows. I can't even remember right now off the top of my head. But yeah, I've always loved performing, but I've also done a lot of administrative theater internships with Shays on Hamilton, and I did some. Well, I got accepted for one with Glimmerglass, but I got canceled in 2020. And then I'm just completing a programming assistant job with the Broadway League, so that's been quite awesome. And oh, forgot to say who I'm playing in the show. Hermia from A Midsummer Night's Dream, Titania also from A Midsummer Night's Dream, um, Lady Anne from Richard III, and Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. Great. I think that's everything.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabriella. And before I pass it off to Kiana, I'm just going to share one more little detail with our viewers. Gabriella and Kiana are both part of our touring show this summer season, Shakespeare and Love, which is a 1-hour production with an original script by our founder and artistic director, Saul Elkin. So those are the multitude of roles that Gabriella just listed that she's playing in this 1 hour, which is crazy to think about. She switches hats so many times. And I'm going to pass it over to Kiana now so she can share a little bit about herself.
Hi, folks. I'm Kiana Duganhaus. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am from from the Buffalo area originally, but I actually currently go to SUNY New Paltz in the Hudson Valley, where I'm studying theater as well as linguistics. So I actually went through the Shakespearean internship program. I did 2 summers as an intern with Shakespeare in Delaware Park. It was awesome. I worked on The Winter's Tale in 2016 and King Lear in 2018. And in Buffalo, I've gone to work at, I've done Irish classical. I was in Sive a couple of years ago. But mostly it's in the Hudson Valley in the last couple of years. So I've worked with the Hudson Valley Performing Arts Laboratory in Poughkeepsie, which does a bunch of devised theater work. And we did a very cool collaboration with um, the on-campus art museum, working with putting together skits and songs and all sorts of different performances inspired by the art in the museum, which is very cool. And so in this production, I am Juliet Helena in Midsummer Night's Dream, Rosalind in As You Like It, and a smattering of sonnets and all that fun stuff.
Oh.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Thank you
I'm
both
so
so much. Perfect. We're going to get started then. Now that we both know Kiana and Gabriella, we're just going to get started for these next 20 or 30 minutes. So by just a little panel discussion here between the three of us. As Katie mentioned in the beginning, please feel free to use the chat if at any time you have any questions relevant to what we're talking about. We'll take those as we go. Otherwise, we will have some time at the end, about 15 minutes or so, for a brief Q&A. And you're welcome to ask the three of us any questions you have about Shakespeare in Delaware Park, performing Shakespeare, or upcoming summer season, anything like that. So Kiana and Gabriella, to get started, can you just tell us how you find Shakespeare's text as an actor to be different than that of a traditional musical or a more modern straight play?
Well, who do you want to go first?
Either one of you. Feel free. Gabriella, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I remember when I was in school and I was taking my Shakespeare classes, as all theater majors do. We in our Shakespeare section, one of the things that we all, as like new incoming Shakespeare performers, was doing. We were taking a lot of time to think about like our lines. We would go line, and think about it. Whereas Shakespeare, you act on the line, like what you're feeling happens while you're saying it. You don't think about it, internalize it, and then perform it. Whereas in a lot of like modern plays, we go, no, but I wouldn't want to. Whereas Shakespeare, it's no, I wouldn't want to perform it on the line, which is something I really love about Shakespeare. And also, there are a lot of words that we don't know in Shakespeare's texts. There are a lot of words that we'll be surprised that we actually do know, but there are a lot of words that I coming in didn't know. So there's a lot more research and like learning when I'm doing Shakespeare than when I'm doing another play. You know what I mean? Which is also fun because you get to learn about what different things were called, and you get to learn new words. But that's something that I definitely had to get acclimated to when doing Shakespeare. Yep.
Yeah, it's a very specific type of brain exercise, I think, working with Shakespeare, because it is poetry. Most of it is written in verse, which I find to be quite helpful some of the time, because as Gabby said, it's very actionable. And so having that sort of rhythm that gets going, you really get into this. You're really chugging along once you get going, which can be really nice. It really keeps the energy flowing. And it's helpful to you as an actor once you get used to it. But there is definitely that little hurdle of, oh, why are they talking like this? That I think can be scary. And it's a lot to take in at first. And then on the flip side of that, going back and doing Shakespeare that's in prose, so not in verse, it's closer to the way regular people speak. I find now is kind of harder to memorize because I get used to letting the verse and the iambic pentameter and the rhythm and all of that help me memorize my text. And so in that As You Like It scene that I'm doing as Rosalind, it feels very weird because there's sort of nothing. I sort of feel like I've been let off my leash a little bit because there isn't that verse that's like keeping me in line. And again, also as Gabby said, the language and this wide variety of vocabulary and using words that maybe we do use today, but using them in different ways, or maybe they pronounced them differently. All of that stuff is a really fun challenge, especially for the linguistics nerd in my brain as well.
Yeah. If I can just add, like, because you mentioned like verse and prose, when I'm doing verse, we learned like a whole bunch of like little things, like obviously scanning your text and right, learning the rhythm, iambic pentameter and all that. And also um, finding that like utilizing the consonants and the vowels like in your text, and like, you know, having the emotion on the emotion on the vowels, and what does the staccato of the consonants and hitting those, what that means. So in a way, Shakespeare really gives you a lot of devices, the same way he gives you in when you're talking in verse, a lot of devices to tell you like what the actor is supposed to do here, and what you're supposed to do your with your heart, really, like where the scene's supposed to go. And I always find that like super helpful, especially when working in verse, because it's paced for you. It's paced for you. Whereas when you're working with like prose or like modern text, you have to find that on your own, which can be difficult, but also fun. You know, that's half the fun of theater. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Gabrielle, I'm so glad you brought that up because, you know, like you said, Shakespeare, he must have had very little faith in the actors of his time because he wrote everything out for you. There is no room for you to not understand what he wanted you to do. And something, you know, we talk about a lot when we're performing Shakespeare is that there's no subtext in his writings, meaning you don't have to sit there and analyze what the character is trying to say, or, you know, read between the lines per se, which is oftentimes something that you have in again modern plays that we have today. You have to kind of decipher and get into the head of your character, whereas Shakespeare, he tells you, you know, if I'm sad, I'm sad, and you know, if I love this person, I'm telling you I love this person, even if that character is saying it to the audience. And like both of you were saying, it allows for this wonderful opportunity to really just dive in and spend so much time with the words and creating the, again, Kiana used the word poetry, the visual poetry, and then, you know, the almost vocal poetry that the words can create of, you know, emphasis on the vowels like you're saying, or the rhythm like Kiana was saying of iambic pentameter, which is something they were both referencing. Which, fun fact for those that are viewing, iambic pentameter is actually just a form of poetry, like Kiana was saying. And it's actually in a lot of modern songs today. So there's a rhythm to it that feels like a heartbeat. And there's several songs that are really popular modern songs today that have an iambic pentameter rhythm to it. And that's what creates the just the natural rhythm that feels very emotional. And that's why Shakespeare's text can be so emotive when you perform it, and when you listen to it as an audience member, even if you don't understand the words, like Gabriella and Kiana were both saying. And so, you know, it's a wonderful opportunity as an actor to really not have to worry about the psychological behind the scenes of an actor, and you get to just really focus on what the playwright himself was wanting you to say and do on stage. And I'm curious, and it leads me to the next question. How is your process as an actor different with Shakespeare when you're preparing your script and in rehearsals, or, you know, having your script for the first time? How is that process with the Shakespearean script different from other scripts? And either one of you can go first.
Well, I guess to harken back to my my Shakespeare apprenticeship training, one of the things that I was taught, I went through when Tracy Snyder was the education coordinator, um, and she taught us a lot about how helpful the punctuation can be to you. Which, bear in mind, Shakespeare himself didn't write a lot of this punctuation that's in the editions we have nowadays. But the editors, generally speaking, and you know, typically a director will pick an edition that they like the punctuation in. So that punctuation is kind of your first director. Some of the time it can be. You can, I know people who subscribe to the school of thought is like, just ignore the punctuation and do follow the words, follow your heart. And that I think is totally valuable too. But for like a very first read, looking at the punctuation and finding, okay, this period means this is the moment that of the levity, this is where I'm taking the breath and completely changing my thought. you know, this colon is a sort of a smaller version of that, and these commas are all lists. It's very helpful with, you know, he has some very long sentences, and so anything to break those down into chunks and to almost like sentence chart it for yourself, to do that little tree and figure out what exactly you're saying, is really helpful from the get-go. Also, of those different online sites that are like Shakespeare glossaries, things like that, to find the individual words that you don't know what they are, very helpful for a first read.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Those Shakespeare sites, those translators, granted, you have to do your own research too, but those Shakespeare sites come in significant handy when you're having a hard time finding the definition for that one word, or that'll make the whole sentence clearer. Those sites really do come in handy. But like for this, well, I also did, I was Amelia in Buffalo State's production of Othello, right? And that was like my first time memorizing, performing in a full-length Shakespeare production. And I learned a lot from that experience. Whereas this show was quite different in the fact that I'm doing like 5 different shows. So thank God we had a month before we started rehearsals, and I did that whole time to just research. I had heard of a lot of these shows. I had seen maybe a couple of them, and I needed to know every single show, because I think that's very helpful. Even if you're just doing a scene, you need to know the whole show. So I had to watch Richard III and Richard II because I forgot what happened. I had to watch A Midsummer Night's Dream. I had to watch Much Ado About Nothing. I had to watch them all just to know where we were and what was happening in this scene. So that was my first step. And then after that, I read through our script first, and then watched the shows, and then read through our script again. And I made note of any words that I didn't understand or wanted further clarification on, made those notes. And then I scanned anything that I had that was in verse. So any of the sonnets or any of the whole of Lady Anne and Richard's scene, right? I had to scan all of that. So I knew where I was going and what I was doing. And after I did that, I think I went forward and like memorizing and learning what I was saying and trying to get it as much into my body as possible. And I kind of do it. Some people memorize before they get into the body of the character. I memorize before I get into the body of the character, before I do anything, so that I can really focus on what I'm saying without having to think about what the next line is, right? So that's what I did. And then I started thinking about the relationship between the characters and really listening to what my partner was saying. And then it was just regular actor work from there, really. And I was just listening and responding, because that's all that acting really is. I was just listening and responding to what the other person was saying, and obviously making some objectives for myself. What do I want? What does this character want? What does this specific person want? And who are they, and what tactics would they use to get what they want based on who they were? That was a long circle, but what would they do to get what they want, being who they are? And that was really where I took it from there. And now we just stay in the moment and keep going with each other.
That's fantastic. No, it was a beautiful circle, and I love the long winding trail of seeing into the actor's mind. I think that's so exciting. That's why we're here today. Gabriella, you said the phrase getting the text into the body, and I think that's super interesting and super relevant, because as you both shared, you break down the text in almost an academic way at first, really like researching it and preparing and understanding the text. But as we all know, Shakespeare is meant to be seen and not heard. It's not a book, it's a play. And for those of you who maybe read Shakespeare in high school, or have tried to read it on your own, you remember how dry it can be if you're just sitting at a desk in 10th grade trying to read Romeo and Juliet, and none of it's computing, because what are all these words that are in italics that the character's not saying, but somehow they're important to the script. And that's where into the body, like Gabrielle is saying, and bringing it to life on stage is really where it becomes important. And I'm curious for the both of you, A, why you think it's important that Shakespeare's seen rather than heard, but also B, how you two as actors bring the work onto stage, bring the text onto the stage after you've done the behind the scenes work of researching online and, understanding all the words that we no longer use, or, paying attention to the grammar and the punctuation, or memorizing as you need to? How do you then put it into your body and bring it onto a stage so that our audiences actually not only A, want to stay around, but B, find some sort of resonance and evoke something for them?
Yeah, I find rehearsing with like moving really helpful. I've done it, I do that with whether I'm rehearsing Shakespeare or whether I'm rehearsing like any show, right? Whether I'm rehearsing anything in the park, anything at all. And whether while I'm doing dishes, I'll be saying, "Foul devil, for God's sake, hence," and see what it brings out. You know what I see what it brings out. You're like, oh, maybe I do like the rubbing of my hands when I do that. And just exploring and trying new things is always helpful when doing any kind of any kind of performance, because you have to fall in love with it. And that's the only way, well, to me, you have to fall in love with it. And that's the only way you're going to put in the work to find new things and putting the work to explore it. So when you're getting into your body, you want to make sure that it's not like a light switch you have to flick on. You want to make it something that's constantly ingrained in the performance of it, and that you're falling in love with it, that your whole body is falling in love with it, and you're not just saying it. It's super important to, especially for modern audiences, to see it rather than just hear it, because like I said, a lot of the stuff we don't know, like a lot of the words we literally do not know. So or the humor is totally not our humor. But the scene from A Midsummer Night's Dream between Helena and Demetrius is so, no, is it Lysa? No, yes, it's Demetrius. It's so funny because of the physical comedy of it. And you have to see it. You have to see the physical comedy of it to understand what's actually happening in this scene. Yes, that she's chasing him and that he's rejecting her. Like, you have to see what's going on for a lot of us to understand it. And it makes it just so much funnier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with the comedy, that applies, because some of the tragedies, I think that hearing it can be really valuable over reading it. I think that probably the worst way you can approach Shakespeare is by just reading it on a page. There's a lot of value to those footnotes, and some of these editions are really, really good. The Barnes and Noble tends to have really great footnotes, but it's not the same. It's not as fun, and I think that also one of the joys of doing Shakespeare in the park is, that it's such a visceral experience, to be performing outdoors. And Shakespeare was written long before movies were a thing. Just the fact that you're physically there with each other, I think, has a lot of additional value on top of just the general physicalization. There's something very human about that connection, and getting it in your body, and uh, and sort of taking up the space, and taking up the space in relation to the audience, can be really touching in very interesting ways. I also, Gabby, I am pleased to hear that I'm not the only one who does my beer in the kitchen. My cats have both heard quite a few sonnets at this point, I think, because
Yes.
you've gotta do it on your feet. You've got to do it as you, I think, as well. I think that sometimes, because this text is so old and it's not the way we talk, we feel like we need to sort of heighten it outside of ourselves. And I think that doing it, in your car while you're driving, I have to bark in this show, folks. I got to practice that bark somewhere. The car ride to a rehearsal is a great place for no one else to hear you barking. Um, and you just have a chance to play as you, and it will build into the character, rather than sort of starting from a place of, oh, I have to do Shakespeare now and I have to put on this new thing. It's another piece to the puzzle. It doesn't have to be a whole
Yeah. Oh
world.
my gosh, like what you said about, oh, I wasn't sure if you're done. Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah,
what you
yeah.
said about like it having to be it having to be like it can't just be something that you flick on. Like you can't just go, okay, life, and then, oh, now I'm gonna be Hamlet. No, that doesn't make sense. Like Hamlet has to be a regular person because guess what? We're telling stories about regular people. And oh well, not well, Hamlet isn't regular, but like they're people at the end of the day. You know what I mean? They're people at the end of the day, and that's what we really have to accentuate. That's what's going to bring the audience in and make them really care about these characters. Otherwise, why not just go to a museum and look at some pictures? Like, and like that's what's going to breathe life into them. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because I thought that was a great point. Plus, being outside makes it so much more dramatic, I think. Like when a bug flies in your mouth. I love when we all like work with these things. Like a bug flew in my mouth some time ago, and I was like, right, and I was back in the scene, and it was just so much. It brought it to life. It just adds another breath of life into it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a perfect
Performing the
segue.
balcony
Oh, sorry,
scene.
go ahead, Kiana.
Oh, I was just going to say, performing the balcony scene when it had like just started raining the other day at rehearsal, it just feels different. There's, they're so in love that they're continuing to talk and to talk about how in love they are. The rain is just pouring down on us. It's great.
Loved it.
It's fantastic. So that's a perfect segue for you both. Can you tell us a little bit about your process this summer? As you've been rehearsing and preparing for the touring show of Shakespeare in Love, and specifically talking about outside. I think that's an excellent point you both bring up. It's very different to perform a script in an environment that you don't have control of versus the confines of four walls of a theater. Everything from lighting to sound to your costume abilities to even your acting abilities. You're talking about you're outside, so there's dirt, there's grass, there's mud. How does that influence how you play with the script and with the performance itself?
Well, Gabby brought up earlier, Ricky Needham and I have a scene from A Midsummer Night's Dream, a chase scene between Helena and Demetrius, and I think that is going to be the single most, the single scene where setting matters for me as an actor, because I'm doing things like crawling around on the ground, and Ricky gives me a piggyback ride at one point. All of those things. So what the ground is matters for how that scene goes, because I need to be paying attention to, am I about to throw myself to the ground on top of a bunch of rocks? Am I going to trip on a root while I'm chasing him? All of those sorts of things, which on the one hand can be kind of scary. You need to really be on your game. But on the other hand, it's a scene that's happening in the woods. She's chasing him through the woods. So, the acting is only so much of the work is something coming from inside of you when you actually are just running over grass and rocks and roots and pebbles and all of that sort of stuff that you just really have to keep track of, and you just really are, in a little light peril, just a little bit. It really it does a lot of my job for me, it feels like at times. But then on the flip side, sometimes we get rehearsals canceled because it's raining too much to safely do things. And there probably will be locations where we might have to change some stuff up a bit for safety and for all that sort of thing. And you never know who's gonna bike past screaming stuff while you're rehearsing, or any of those sorts of things that are always, you know, outdoor theater is really live theater plus, because there's always a gamble with a live audience. But when you also have the weather and dogs and bugs and all of those sorts of things, there are just a million more variables to keep track of. But I think it's fun. It keeps me on my toes. It's a fun challenge. I love it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's honestly so much fun. We couldn't stress the fun enough. Um, Especially in a cast of four people, like we've been having so much fun together, especially being outside in the park and stuff. But to me, this is my first time ever like performing outside, this open to the elements, right? And it has been quite the adjustment. For me, it's the bugs. It's the bugs for me because especially right after it rains and it's humid, or like right before it's gonna rain and it's humid, those bugs are really everywhere. And it's, I, I've like dropped lines like, what is happening to me? And that never happens before because I'm in a controlled environment. This is such an uncontrolled environment that it takes a new level of like commitment that I didn't even know I had to the scenes and to being like present in these scenes, because there are so many exterior like distractions. Like there was a super cute dog like 4 feet from us. You have to be in your scene to not look at that dog. There were blowhorns going off while we're doing music playing, songs I love playing in the middle of our scenes. And you have to be super focused and super like in super focused and super committed to what we're doing to not get distracted. So that's been a huge hurdle for me. And obviously the rain and those, granted, I don't go on the ground like, well, I kneel on the ground, but I don't run around on the ground like you do, Kiana. But it's something to just know, especially when we're dealing with costumes and shoes and stuff, to be aware that, okay, if the ground is wet, we might not want to be pressing all our body weight into the mud, you know what I mean? Or you might want to take a kneel and to take a knee instead of fully kneeling on into the ground just to preserve the costumes. So there are a couple of adjustments that we have to make. But like I said, I'm all for the drama of what these scenes add. Like when the wind is blowing, come on, tell me that doesn't add a new kind of life into a scene where you have to really scream, not like don't fake your scream. You got to really scream for people to hear these lines. And when the wind is howling and you're saying, "Oh God, yes, oh God." So I love that about being outdoors. That's always a great time.
I also, as you mentioned the adorable dogs. Those adorable dogs are usually attached to people as well. And that is one thing that I like. I don't know if everyone who performs in the park likes it or not, but sometimes you'll get a little bit of an audience for a scene or two. People will just walk by and kind of, oh, what's going on here, and just stop and watch. And at least at this point in rehearsals, we're getting close to opening. I think that's really nice that I have people that I can talk to other than just our director and our stage manager and whatever actors might not be in the given scene. I think it's really nice to be able to connect with people. And generally speaking, I don't think that I've made people super uncomfortable when I've, made eye contact with them while I'm saying a speech or something like that. Because it's a very precious moment to be able to connect with someone while you're performing. You don't usually get that in rehearsals, especially not in like week 2 of rehearsals.
I second that. It's awesome.
That's a great point. That's a wonderful point. And talking about the distractions, both the good ones, the cute dogs, and the bad ones, not even bad, but the more challenging ones of high winds or slight rain or some mud that you didn't notice as you kneel down for a second in a scene. It creates those real life reactions and connections to making your characters human, like you were talking about, of when you're washing dishes or you're just you're saying your lines to your cat or you're barking in your car on the way to rehearsal. Like it's very cool to be on the hill, or any hill, as this year's a little bit different, the Shakespeare Hill. It's very cool to be at a Shakespeare in Delaware Park performance and get to watch a performance not once but twice, because no two performances are the same for the reasons you both just said. There is a presence that is required in an outdoor environment that is so high, and you have to be so acutely aware of being in the scene, and but also everything around you, that it really kind of transcends I'm an actor performing a character into I'm an actor working together with this character that I'm performing to make sure that these external elements I have no control over can help to tell my story and not be you know, a distraction in a sense. It's a really amazing thing. And I think it's even more amazing and enhanced because it's Shakespeare. For all the reasons, you know, the two of you have said, whether it be the language that feels so foreign, but there's something so magical about being on stage and stringing together these words that really do feel like a foreign language, yet they still evoke, you know, happiness or pain or the feeling of being in love. It's really it's such a unique feeling. And, you know, again, going back to the way in which you bring it to life, having, you know, making it seen and not heard, or the use of grammar, or the use of the rhythm of that heartbeat, da-dun, rhythm, that really, it just, your body naturally calls to bring that out. Um, and I'm curious for you two specifically, because you have experience in Shakespeare, but you also have a lot of experience in other forms of theater and performing as well. Why do you think it's important for actors to perform Shakespeare, and why do you two personally enjoy performing Shakespeare? I'm assuming you enjoy performing Shakespeare. I would hope.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I love it because of the the drama. Wait, Kiana, I couldn't remember. Was it your turn to talk first?
Oh, no, it's totally okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, like I love drama. I love Phantom of the Opera is my favorite show. If that gives life to how much drama I love in a show, right? um, so the words, each, how do I put this? Each word, each piece of text feels so carefully put together. Like it feels so, it's like good craftsmanship. You know what I mean? It's like when you find a chair and you're like, dang, someone put their heart into this chair. That's how I feel every time I read Shakespeare. I go to my family members and to my boyfriend and I'm like, listen to this, listen to this. Oh, foul devil, for God's sake. And I'm reading it with like, do you hear how he put this together? And I feel like that's what turns me on about Shakespeare. That's what I love about it. And I think it's important for every actor to experience and to perform because back to that point about acting on the lines rather than internalizing everything and performing it, I feel like that gets really boring and really old really quick. And that's something that a lot of actors have. I know I was guilty of it too. A lot of actors have really gotten into the habit of doing. Let me think about this. Let me savor this moment. Let me savor this. And no, Shakespeare forces you to push it out there and to show us what's happening. Um, it's very active, and you know it's the root of acting. Act, perform, do it. Let me see you do it, and that's what I feel like Shakespeare forces us to do. It forces you to reconnect with your body, reconnect with the ground, and with what's happening in the scene. And if you want to be an actor that's like in the present moment, I feel like this is something that you should definitely connect to, or at least, you know, test test your connectivity to your body and to the words by doing Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do sort of feel like it's important to note that I don't think everyone has to want to do Shakespeare all the time. Like, I totally get that it's not everyone's thing, and I think that's okay. But I do think there is a lot of value in that idea of that active work. And also because the language is hard, if I think if you can overcome that hurdle, that can be so lift so much off of you, you know, because we do put Shakespeare up on a pedestal and put all these old texts up on a pedestal. And if you you know, can teach yourself or can work with other people to learn to take on this text, you can kind of handle just about any other text that's going to be thrown at you. You know, assuming it's in your own language. Um, uh, also think that there's a lot of value in having I call it a same hat moment with people from hundreds years ago, of having that moment of reading or performing something that's about things that you still feel that was written in the 1500s. Um, you know, we keep doing Shakespeare because we keep feeling like Shakespeare characters. And there's so much value in putting new works on the stage and in listening to new modern playwrights talk about specifically modern issues. But there also is a whole lot of value in listening to people from 400 years ago and what were they going through. And oh, it does still feel like that a lot of the time, and all of those sorts of things. I think that's a big part of what art is for, I think, is connecting other people. And I think that should include connecting to people who are long dead, connecting to your ancestors, connecting to other people's ancestors, just tying it all together. I think that's beautiful, and it's a very fun adventure.
Kiana,
I just,
love. Oh,
you're fine. I'm sorry.
no, please go ahead. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
As I'm hearing Kiana talk, right, about finding your ancestors and that whole recognition of the past and it still being so current, like it made me think about one of the other actors, Dan, right? His sonnet, and it's my mistress's eyes are nothing like I can't remember, right? But it's like that, and her like lips are not. There's far more red and coral, that whole thing. And as I'm listening to it, as an actor of color, right, as a Black actress, I was listening to it, and I was like, dang, black wires growing upon her head, her breasts are like done. I'm like, this sounds awfully like a Black woman. And Shakespeare is often so like performed, it's often performed by white actresses and white actors, and we often see like a lot of white performances surrounding like Shakespeare. So oftentimes a lot of people of color will be like, oh, that's not for me, that's not for me, that's for them, that's for them. But in reality, like if you look at it, everyone's there. Like I feel like everyone is in Shakespeare and everyone can find themselves in Shakespeare. So then I did my research, and lo and behold, like there was like a whole thing of sonnets dedicated to the Dark Lady. And I was like, wow, look at us. I gained like this whole thing of excitement. So I was like, dude, like, this is like to me. And I feel like it's important for people of color to really like look at these stories, because even as much as you might feel like distance from those stories, like they're there for you too. And we're there in these stories, meant to fill these roles as well. And that just lifts my heart to the moon. So that's another reason why I think it's so important for everyone to experience Shakespeare, to find that these love stories were there for you too. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is important to note. We often forget, but the current to get up on a sort of scholarly, pedantic sort of thing, the current scholarly interpretation of Shakespeare's sonnets is that there were sonnets written to the young man and to the dark lady, and that's sort of what these mysterious unknown figures are referred to. So Shakespeare wasn't writing love poems to Gwyneth Paltrow. So sorry to Shakespeare in Love, but the two great loves of his life, presumably based on what we know of these sonnets and based on what we know of about his life, were a man and a woman who was probably maybe a woman of color. And I think that we should talk about that more. We should put up on pedestal that Shakespeare was probably a bisexual guy, and that he wrote love poems to a woman who, at the very least, did not fall under the normal European British beauty standards of the time. I don't know much specifically about either of these people, but he wasn't writing love poems to Gwyneth Paltrow.
Amazing. It's so exciting to hear, you know, your process as performers and artists and actors, because it's a really cool way, again, you know, behind the curtain. It's a cool way to see as our viewers, as audience members, and myself, you know, as someone involved with Shakespeare but not performing on the stage. It's really cool to see what goes into your process of, you know, breaking down a script and, you know, putting it on stage and stuff. But for me personally, I hope for those viewers, you know, watching as well right now, this last conversation has been the most fascinating and resonated the most with me, because it proves again, like you've both said, Shakespeare is his works are relatable, and they're relatable over 400 years later. And they're relatable in ways at face value we don't even think they're relatable. You know, the discoveries that you two are making as artists, and the ways in which you're connecting to his works through his text, through the context of what he's writing, through the emotions that he gives you. Like Kiana said, you know, we continue to perform Shakespeare's characters because we find ourselves in Shakespeare's characters. And that's just, it's what an amazing thing that, you know, we can still find connections to humans and ideas that were around 400 years ago, and we can still bring them to the stage today, because, and, you know, at the core, they're still resonant. So it's an amazing thing. I would like to give time. We have about 10 minutes left. I would love to give time to any questions that we do have. Katie, if you received any.
I did, but first I want to thank all of you for that really wonderful conversation. That was awesome to
Yeah,
hear the
amazing.
behind the curtain information. Wow. Okay, so this first thing that I'm seeing here is, sorry if you said this, I love your talk. How do you keep track of all the lines for different characters that you're playing?
Oh,
Whoever
Either
wants to
Kiana or,
take
yeah,
that.
sorry, I couldn't tell if Gabby was trying to or frozen. Well, for one thing, for the most part, we're going scene by scene, so it is organized for us pretty nicely. But at least for me, all of my different characters talk pretty differently. You know, I have Juliet, who is 13 and very poetic and very romantic. And then I have Rosalind, who speaks entirely in prose and kind of in sort of riddles some of the time, it feels. She's very funny and she's very snarky. And then I have Helena, who is in poetry, but she's in the midsummer poetry that's very meant to be comedic and sort of almost feel like it feels very sing-songy, but also very silly. So you, at least for me, I'm able to sort of get used to an individual character's voice pretty well. And also we work on it scene by scene, so it just sort of starts to get sorted in your brain after a little while is the more technical answer, that you just sort of get used to it.
No, I totally agree. Like, you do just kind of get used to it. Like, you kind of just, it's the same way you memorize any show, like or any scenes in order, right? Because if we're doing oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of any other show besides all the Shakespeare shows for the life of me. But but if you're memorizing show, right? Your scenes are in order, right? Your scenes are in order, your lines come in order. It's the same way I'm memorizing this show, Shakespeare and Love, because and we're actually even helped because we have introductions before every scene. So that really helps. You're like, oh snap, yeah, this is. I thought this might have been my scene, but this definitely is the scene because I definitely do play Beatrice in this scene. So let me get ready. You know what I mean? So we have that to help us. Memorizing lines, just at least for me, is very much. I tried doing the whole like memorize it by beat or memorize it by this technique or that technique. And I find it easiest to literally just sit down, read the line, say it without looking at it, say it without looking at it, read the line, say it without looking at it, say it without looking at it, and memorize it that way. Move my hand on the page, down until I memorize every single line. But with Shakespeare, I mean, with any show really, but really with Shakespeare, for me at least, you don't try to paraphrase anything. The words have to be exactly what the word is, and just so that things line up, like in especially in verse, obviously, like so that things line up as they're supposed to, and you have the right amount of syllables in each thing, and iambic pentameter pans out and all that. So going back and forth with my hand, memorizing everything in order, or I do the biggest chunks first. Like I memorized Richard III, which is in close to the end of the show, first, and I memorized Beatrice and Benedict first because it was my longest. They were my longest scenes. But other than that, I just go in order and just go down with my hand, memorizing it until I don't mess up. Or you know what? A better tool than just doing that, writing it down. I write it down so that I have like a written recollection of exactly what I said. So, well, what I thought I said. And I write it all down, and then I compare it side by side with like the actual text that I have. And then I know, okay, I messed up on this word, underline it. And then I do that a lot of times. You might get cramps in your hand, but you will have your lines down. And that's what's important here. So that's always really helpful. And honestly, just running it over and over again really helps to get it in order.
Wow, thank you both so much for that. Just a couple more things that I'm seeing here. So we have a comment. It says, I love your appreciation for the work. Your passion is contagious. I agree with that.
I agree
And
as well, very much so.
then we have, do either of you have any pre-performance rituals that you do?
Not so much for Shakespeare specifically. If I'm doing a show with an accent, I'll talk to myself in the accent usually beforehand to like really get it into my head. I don't think so much for this one. But we also haven't had performances yet, so who's to see?
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of getting used to. I like to get my whole body. Like I said, I'm very active when it comes to. Even when I'm sitting here, like you see, I'm like doing all these things with my hands and my body. But I'm very like active when it comes to anything or performance in general. So I like to get my body ready. So you'll see me like looking like I'm getting ready to run a race or something, warming up my wrists, warming up my ankles, warming up my quads, everything. And before shows, I like to do jumping jacks, or even just before scenes, but we don't really have, I don't know if we have backstage or not. So I usually do jumping jacks before I get on stage just to reconnect with my breath. Um, or like run in place or something, but always something really active. Um, some people don't like it, some people do, but I love talking to people before I go on stage. I love like just practicing practicing listening to somebody else, practicing talking to and communicating with somebody else just before, so that when I get on stage, I'm not thinking about my lines, I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm just thinking about, yeah, connecting with this person. Like we're here. We've been here this whole time. We're just doing it again. And now we have people watching us do it. So that really helps me.
Yeah,
Wow.
a good warm up.
Oh, thank you both for sharing that with us. Next, I'm seeing I have a deeper appreciation for these works now. Thank you so much. I'm seeing, do you consider yourselves to be brave? I think actors are incredibly brave to do what they do, and I admire and envy you so much. Thank you for what you do. I guess, how do you view yourselves? Do you realize that this is brave in some people's minds? What are your thoughts on that, if we can expand? I'm just curious.
That's a good question. I mean, do I consider myself brave? Well, I consider myself brave, but not for that. I I I consider it more vulnerable. Well, I guess then that would be brave. Yeah. But vulnerable is what I really see, like in actors that I adore, like the Meryl Streeps and Viola Davises of this world. Like that's what I see when I look at them. I'm like, dang, that's vulnerable. Like you really just put your heart out there and said these words that a lot of people would be scared to say, or explored these topics and these themes that people would be afraid to explore, or did something with your body or with your eyes that that like, no, I'm afraid, I don't like when my eyebrows look like that, I don't like when my nose looks like that, I don't like, no, you let all that go and just really let us see the character. And that's what I really appreciate about actors. And I hope, I think I do that. I feel vulnerable when I perform. And I try to take as many risks as possible when I'm performing, especially with my voice, because I have a deep voice. So I like to try to get out of there. I like to try to take it as high as I possibly can. And because that for me is a risk. And um, so yeah, I guess vulnerable, brave, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's I'm touched that someone would call me brave, because that's not the first word that comes to my mind either. I think more about like the vulnerability side of it, and the creativity and the explorative side of it, I think. But I suppose those are brave things to be sometimes. But I think of it a lot more as experimentation. I think of myself more as a certain kind of mad scientist than as uh than as a brave superhero or something to that effect.
Oh, I love that.
Great.
Yeah, we're
Great answers, ladies.
superheroes.
You are. You all are. It's wonderful. And the last thing I'm seeing here is I just enjoyed this so much. Thank you for your time today. So thank you, everyone. And Grace, I'll turn it back over to you before we close.
Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you all for watching today. We're so glad you joined us. We're glad you enjoyed it. We're glad you learned something new and appreciated Shakespeare. We're really just checking all of our boxes here. So thank you so much. And I will agree with that last comment. I agree, actors are incredibly brave. It takes a lot of courage to go up on a stage and to bare yourself and expose yourself emotionally like that, in hopes of connecting with someone in the audience. It's a very brave thing. So we appreciate your appreciation for our actors. And I just wanted to share a little information about the show that Gabriella and Kiana are in this summer. Again, it's called Shakespeare and Love. It's written by Saul Elkin, our founder and artistic director, and it's a 1 hour show. It's a medley of Shakespeare scenes, all pertaining to love, the good, the bad, and the ugly of love. We have a lot of different stuff. It's a 4-person show that's touring around Western New York. So this one is not at Delaware Park. It's going across Western New York, and it'll happen on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, starting this Friday, July 9th, and going through August 22nd. If you would like more information or would like to see the show, tickets are booking up very fast. So please head to our website, www.shakespeareindelawarepark.org. Tickets are free. We, of course, as always, accept donations, but there is no cost for these. You just need to pre-register for our capacity counts. You're welcome to head there. We have some FAQ, any question and answers you have about the show. Katie, thank you so much. She just dropped the link in the chat there. And yeah, we would love to see you this summer. If not at our touring show, we do have a Midsummer Night's Walk, which is taking place in Delaware Park, not on our normal hill, but that is a walking tour around Delaware Park to different scenic areas, and you'll be led by the mischievous fairy Puck, and that is about a 45-minute walk. So either 2 options for you. Again, they're booking up very fast. We would love to see you there. Otherwise, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We hope to be back with Katie and University Express in the fall for another show. And we hope to see you all next year for 2022 when we're back to our normal season.
Definitely. Thank you all so much. And to everyone who's on, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.